Hey, sorry for the delay, but I'm a procrastinator. Okay, so X-Men Apocalypse, directed by Bryan Singer and starring James McAvoy, Jennifer Lawrence, Michael Fassbender, and Oscar Isaac. I liked it. Not as much as Days of Future Past, and I'm not going to run out and buy the Blu-ray immediately after it comes out, but this is definitely a positive review. I enjoyed a vast majority of it. Well, 60%. So the story goes, En-Sabanur, played by Oscar Isaac, lived in Egypt 5,000 years ago where he was worshipped by thousands of people. But a couple of them decided to betray him and left him buried underground. In the present day, the exposure of mutants has led to cults forming that worship mutants. And one of them worships En-Sabanur and resurrects him successfully. Which luckily Rose Byrne from the last two X-Men movies was around to witness the whole thing, and she can provide all the expository dialogue anybody needs, which Professor X does immediately. The beginning came off kind of weak, uh, unfocused. The whole movie was pretty unfocused, but the beginning is when it should count the most. If you, it was just a bunch of almost disconnected scenes introducing all the new X-Men's, Cyclops, Nightcrawler, Jean Grey, and then reintroducing Mystique as the main protagonist again. So I am not a fan of Jennifer Lawrence. I find her physically boring and way overvalued in this franchise. Um, I I kind of saw the point of her in First Class, but she just became way too big. If Mystique had the same role that Rebecca Romijn's Mystique had, this would have been fine. She could have just been supporting. But now she's the leader of the X-Men. She's recruiting people for the X-Men. I don't know. It feels forced. If I couldn't care about Mystique in First Class, I'm not going to care about her now. But I did like everything Michael Fassbender did. He put in a top-notch performance that nobody else really compared to. Even he had the best F word in it. Anytime an X-Men movie drops an F-bomb, it's special, at least to me. But Michael Fassbender in this one dropped the best one. He carried all the emotional weight of the entire movie. Like, I can't think of anything anyone else did that even, like, compared. Everyone else was just there for camp, basically. So Michael Fassbender brought more to this role than I feel like it really deserved. He brought, like, his Steve Jobs level performance to a comic book character. A lot of it came off campier than previous films. Days of Future Past tried to take itself a little bit more seriously, I think. They're clearly going for the levity that Marvel saturates its films with, but it felt forced. Certain lines, when Jean Grey says, "Oh, we all agree the third film's always the worst," and after Wolverine runs away, Cyclops says, "I hope that's the last we see of him," and it's like, "Oh wow, you're really winking at the camera there." I think they're clearly trying to go for a Deadpool style fourth wall break, but it doesn't work in the characters. They're not the right characters for the meta humor. Deadpool pulls it off because it's like his entire thing. X-Men is a tricky franchise because the overlaying metaphor is for the civil rights movement of the 60s and to some degree the homosexual civil rights of nowadays. Um, so that gets really preachy, stiflingly, quickly. So you can add humor to that to uh, soften it a little bit, but if you add too much, it takes away from the focus. Quicksilver worked. His scene was definitely bigger than the one in Days of Future Past, but it did a lot of the same things. It didn't really add to it. It just made it longer and an explosion instead of gunfire. But because there were so many children in the Quicksilver scene, I didn't really have any fear that any of them were going to die. And then when someone did die, it was like, oh, it was because he was getting annoying and they needed to bring in the new guy. So aside from just killing off the one character, Quicksilver's scene wasn't necessary. Not like the explosion didn't need to happen. It was just there to kill one person off. So, whatever. As for Apocalypse, I wasn't afraid of him. Like throughout the movie, whenever he killed someone, He did it with no effort whatsoever. So he could have murdered everyone without any horsemen, without Cerebro, nothing. But he had some dumbass plan to remake the universe and or whatever he was doing. Survival of the fittest. I remember that. None of it was necessary. He could have vaporized every single X-Men instantly and just didn't. So I I like I like Oscar Isaac, but I was a lot more afraid of him than in Ex Machina than this. But that's the trouble with villains with such high power levels is you got to just fabricate ways to slow them down to drag out the movie, like Ultron. And his horsemen didn't do anything. I was very disappointed in one aspect of this film that nobody did anything through the middle of it. It was Magneto stuff, Professor X stuff, and like character building for the new X-Men that I barely care about. But his horsemen did nothing. Salak had like two things, and then before the end battle, Angel was neat, but he just became an ornament. Didn't do anything until the end of the movie. And but I do have high hopes for Olivia Munn and Alexander Shipp in the future because while they didn't do anything, they had a good look to them. They were interesting, especially Storm. Storm may have been the standout of the movie for me. She was cool. She was cute at the same time. Badass. I remember in the trailer that spot where she comes down through the lightning. Goosebumps. But during the final battle, she was just standing there watching it. And as for the new X-Men, Cyclops, Nightcrawler, I couldn't really get into. I liked Alan Cumming as Nightcrawler. I liked the whole Nightcrawler story in X2 with his religious background, his tortured ways, but this new Nightcrawler was just comedic relief and a teleporting machine. And it's like there's hundreds of mutants. I'm sure a couple of them have teleportation abilities. You didn't need to reintroduce a character whose story has already been told. And as for Cyclops, I've never liked Cyclops. He's just the pretty boy leader type to me, and he's the wrong. He's like the opposite of Tom Hardy. They cut off the wrong part of his body for him to act with. Tom Hardy does great with his eyes. This guy doesn't have his eyes at all, and we're just doing his weird Tom Hardy lips. Bland, milk toast. Couldn't get into him. But Sophie Turner was the one I was looking at the most because I am a Game of Thrones fan, and Sansa has been a very controversial character for me because I didn't like her for the first 4 seasons, and then the last 2 seasons she started getting good when she came into contact with Ramsay. So I wanted to see what kind of range she had outside of the Sansa character, and I feel like she just brought a lot of Sansa's strength with her, and then just slapped on an American accent, which I commend. It was a decent American accent. She nailed the R's, which is, the key to doing our accent. So in conclusion, taken on a scene-by-scene basis, it has a lot of compelling moments, but when you look at the whole thing as a whole, it's not a great movie. It's an X-Men movie. So I'm going to give it a 75. Thank you.